Alright, so today we're going to install the rear remote kit for a Kioti CS2220. First thing we're going to do, we're going to get all the parts out, check them against the parts list, make sure we got all the parts to then contact the dealer if needed, if we need, if they missed any parts. Alright, so we got all the parts laid out. I'm keeping them in their bags until I got to use them. So I'm just doing that, but I was able to do the check and ensure that we had all the parts in the kit per the packing list. And so now we're ready to get started to install the unit. Now starting off, it says to remove the right rear wheel and also the fender. Now I don't know if the fender is needed to be removed. I went ahead and did it. It's not very hard. It's you just want to make sure you go slow and make sure all the particularly the electrical connections are disconnected and before you take the fender off. And so there's not too many electrical connections. If you got the working light, got to take that guy off. And then the connections for the road lights, the brake light and the blinker, those come off pretty easy. And then there's some connections for on the left side for your cruise control and your USB outlets, and then also there's a connection for the seat. And then it's not too many bolts. You got to do the ROP system bolts, so all 4 of those. And then there's a couple bolts that bolt the I don't know what you call these, but like the plastic units that sit on the fender. There's a couple that go in there, and then the fender itself is bolted to the chassis in 4 places, 2 over here and 2 over here. There's 1 here, and then there's 1 right there. And then what I did made it easier. I actually took the joystick lever off, and then you're gonna it's pretty obvious to take it off, but you're gonna want to make sure you get all the knobs off of it. I just put them back on just so I don't lose them as I'm going through the installation procedure. But it's I wouldn't say it's very hard. You just want, like I said, want to make sure you go through and unhook everything. There's also some fasteners that fasten cables to the back side of the fender. You want to make sure you get all that stuff too. But pretty easy. It is a 2-person job. Oh, and this has got to come off too. Again, pretty exclamatory. Also, I will note that this guy, you're going to want to take this one off too, or else you won't be able to get the fender off. It's kind of weird to get off. It does have a nut in it, so that's fine, but it's a 10 millimeter. It's got 10 millimeter wrench flats, and so you just kind of rotate it off. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Now that we have the fender off, we're just going to get going toward the rear remote installation. Okay, so first step says to install this valve support, and it's pretty self-explanatory, except one thing that the parts listing doesn't tell you is, you know, which like how long the bolts are, and it's kind of confusing because these number 25s are in a package with 3 different sets of bolts, and so 2 of them are the same thread pitch, just longer. And so for this valve support, it's actually the shorter ones. The longer ones will actually attach to the rear remotes to the back of the tractor, and I'll kind of show you that right now. So these long ones will actually go here. There's a bracket that attaches the rear remotes back here, and this short guy goes back here. All right, we got the bracket installed, got the 2 bolts in there, and then the snap ring installed. It's worth noting that it's the snap ring that's opened on the edge. It comes in a package with mean, it's kind of easy to tell because this package says it has 3 snap rings, 2 are the same, 1's odd. Use the oddball. And okay, now we're on to step 4. Okay, now we're installing elbow fittings onto the hydraulic valve. It's pretty self-explanatory. Like I said, you just cross-reference the number, part number they're talking about to the listing. That'll get you your actual part number that's listed on the barcodes, and then you can find the correct part. The only thing that seems interesting on the install of these guys is that you only thread it in about halfway, because then it's got a O-ring and a washer. And so you get them situated. I'm getting them situated how the picture has them. I hope that's the right orientation. And then I am tightening down the nuts. And then then the other part is you're installing this connecting rod holder. And what's nice about that is the pins and washer and clip ring, or the clip, are all in this one package, so you don't have to go fishing for that. Most of these are kind of all in separate packages. It's not hard to get, but you just gotta cross-reference the number to the part listing, find the actual part number, and go find it in the baggies. All right, we just finished installing the double acting valve on the tractor and also installing the lever control. One thing to note when completing the lever control, definitely install it as the picture shows, so that shows the pin, so the flat head of the pin going in from this side as you're installing it on the bench. And then you would be putting the retainer on, it would be like the back side, right? Because then it flips over when you install it on the tractor, and then you'd be able to access the pins from the outside of the side of the tractor, which would be easy if you ever needed to get it off. So also 37 is the smaller pin, which relates to whatever number on here, and then 38 is the larger pin when you're doing it. So this is what it looks like on the tractor. So here's the valve. When I said tighten the let me turn. When I said tighten these nuts down, I probably wouldn't now. You can access them when they're on the tractor, and this one had to get moved so I could get the bolt in. So it's pretty easy. You just slide it on, put the 2 bolts on. Make sure that the rod from the holder goes through this this piece, and then and also you can see that I've installed the linkage in. It's kind of a pain in the butt, and you definitely want a pair of snap ring pliers to get the snap ring in, but this was super tight going on the rod, so I actually had to use a punch to kind of tap it in. Not really hard, but it definitely needed some convincing. It just doesn't slide on. But yeah, pretty easy. And so like I said, this is what I'm talking about as far as install it, like how the picture is on your bench, because then you can get to the snaps. Alrighty, on to the next one. Okay, now we're at the step of putting some hydraulic lines onto the valve, and this step where it says, after installing elbow 7 on the transmission case, assemble hydraulic hose. Well, I don't know, I think they mean 17, but what's interesting is they don't tell you to install this in any of the first few steps, but you can see it installed right here. Right here, this guy, and it's one of those 90-degree fittings. I'll show you here in a second. And so I 100% recommend getting that installed before you put the bracket on and any of the other items, because you'll see here. So the one they're referring to is this guy back here. Now I just got, it'll have this hose coming from the loader valve. I've already installed it right here. And so the hose is attached to the fitting, and then the fittings into the transmission. So I would get this out and this 90-degree installed before you put all this stuff together. Again, it wasn't in the instructions, and if it was, I missed it, but regardless, because it's kind of a pain in the butt to get to if you have all this stuff installed. All right, we've now completed step 8 and step 9. Step 8 was a pain in the butt because, like I said, you really need to get this 90-degree elbow fitting on the transmission before you put anything else on the tractor. So as you're assembling this guy, and before you put it on, you want to get that, you can see it in the background right now, so you want to get that on before. I'll show you what I had to do to get it on when all this stuff was installed. So it was a real pain in the butt. I've now got it installed and I've got the hard line attached to it, but I ended up taking this line off right here and the connector that goes into the or the fitting that goes into the transmission. And so it wasn't very hard. This is part of that line right here. So it wasn't very hard because it's pretty easy to get to the top one, but it's a pain in the butt to get to the bottom one. So I took, just to make it easier on myself, I took the top one off, wasn't that big a deal. And then I could have pretty much full access to the nut on the lower one. And I was able to get it off and get it on and get it tightened. And then I got this unit on, and then I've got the hose on that attaches to the loader valve. So now I think we're ready to start installing the rear remotes. All right, so we got started here on installing the rear remote section of this install. And this one's pretty easy, so it's a step 10. You just pretty much are bolting stuff together and putting it on the tractor, and I'll show you that. Pretty self-explanatory, nothing crazy here as far as fitment. And now we're moving on to the last page, which would be putting the hoses on, I believe. Almost done. So we got the hard lines installed. That's pretty darn simple. I'd start with the back one, and note they will go together, or they'll go to the couplers kind of backwards, so they need to look like this. But the instructions, just follow the instructions, you'll be fine. And then, like I said, I left these kind of loose from previous. And then what I do is I get the lines started and in. I actually get these tight, and then I tightened up the jam nut. So that kept these two nice and straight. Alrighty, next step is to reinstall the fender and then install the linkage. Alright, we got the fender back on, pretty easy. Little tip, you could take the seat off, and that saves you a little weight as you're moving it around, but pretty easy. Get it lined up, and then got it bolted in. Hardest part was getting it pinched in between this bracket, the fender, and then the other side of the bracket. So that was probably the hardest part, putting it on. Another thing worth mentioning is take pictures and just note how the electrical connections come out of it. This one's pretty obvious for the seat, but the ones for your USB ports and cruise control, where they come out of, I currently got them coming out of that hole. I believe they come out of this one. I got to look at my video, but that was just easiest to put them through. And so everything lined up, just make sure everything lines up and set it down. It should just drop into place, so you shouldn't have to pinch anything or force anything. And so then what I did is I got started on installing the linkage for the lever, and then I started running into a problem. So I noticed that this knuckle, I call it a knuckle, was super stiff. And if you remember from earlier in the video, I had to tap it in with a hammer and a little punch to get it in there, and it was a super tight friction fit. I didn't know anything of it because, like, the instructions don't say how it should fit, it just tells you where to put it. And so what had happened is I got it all together, all linked up, all looking good, and then I was just testing the fit, and then I found that the lever, it was super stiff to move. And so for instance, you would move it in one direction, it took a lot of force to move it, and then it would just stay stuck, and same thing in each direction. And it was because this little knuckle wasn't rotating freely. What I kind of mean by that is your 3-point arms up and down, it's the same kind of feel, or it should be, it's the same kind of valve. So it shouldn't stay in one position and then you have to put it back. It should just go back to the center. So what I had to do, unfortunately, is I had to I also called the dealer and was like, hey, it's pretty tight, what do you recommend? And he mentioned that the part was probably manufactured just a little tight, or the rod that it slips onto is just a little tight, so maybe just polish it on the inside, or the rod a little bit, and then a little bit at a time, and then see how the fit works. And so I finally got it moving nice and free. It's real good, and there's no slap, so that's nice. And how I did it was I just when I finally got it off, I just chucked it up in my vise and used a drill with the biggest bit I got, and then I would just run the drill around and around and around and around, and it wouldn't take off really hardly any material, just kind of polished it out just a little by little until I got the fit that I'm looking for. So this is great. I've already actually done a test fit with it, polished out, and it works perfectly. I just got to reconnect it. And one thing I'm bringing this up is you want to make sure that fit is correct before you start installing any other items. So as you're installing that little knuckle and that whole unit that goes together, you want to make sure that the fit's correct on it, because if you don't, you got to take a bunch of stuff off the tractor to get to it, because I had to use a puller to get the darn thing off because the friction fit was so tight. So I had to loosen the linkage here for the shifter, and then I had to take a hard line out from the transmission. It's a hard line that goes to the loader valve. So I had to take that off to give myself some room, and so to work. And then I also had to take off, there is a little bracket guy, well, not really a bracket, but it's a little guard that goes up here. I had to take that thing off to give myself enough room. So make sure that thing's fit correctly before you go on to your next steps. All right, cool. So now we're gonna get all the linkage put together and show you how it should work, and then we'll get to testing it out a little bit. All right, got everything put together back on this side of the tractor for the controls, and as you can see what I mean, nice good fit here, goes back to center, perfect. And as you can see here, perfect. And then I'm all hooked up here at the back. When I get everything back together, I'll do a video on the function of the cylinder. One thing I wanted to show y'all is that in case you forget and you don't take a picture of where the electrical line should go. So it'll come out of that, where the phone cut goes. Anyways, they come out of there, and that one's pretty easy to explain where it attaches. This one, not so much, because you can accidentally flip it. So, oops. Push through. So, the correct way, got some glare here. The correct way is like that, if you have it flipped over looking at you. So that would be white and blue on the top, green and white on the bottom, brown top left, and then red bottom left. Cool. Just wanted to show you that in case you unplugged it and forgot where it all went. Now we're going to get this on, and I'm going to get the ROPS back on. All right, little tip here, putting the ROPS back on. Pretty easy to take off in one piece. Pretty hard to put on with one piece. It's kind of heavy. And so what I did was I just took it apart in 3 pieces. Bingo, bango, put those 2 on. That's going to be pretty easy to put on. So just wanted to give you that tip. All right, got the ROPS back up. And everything attached now. Got the light on. And we are ready to rock. Just to show you guys the electrical connections in case you didn't take a picture first before you start taking them all apart. Here they are. So this is on the right side of the tractor. So you got green to green and white. You got yellow to brown. You got your ground, which is black. And Nice thing they do about the ground, at least on this tractor, they did it right, where they did the ground connector different from all the other connectors, so you almost can't screw that up. And then the last one is black and yellow to black and red. Cool, so that's the right side of the tractor. Left side of the tractor, I gotta get it out. There we go. Okay, so we got starting up top here. So black's black, so that's ground, it's gonna go to ground. Then you got yellow to brown again. And then you got, that one is striped black and brown to, I can't see that one. Maybe black and white. And then the reds go together. So there we are, we're all connected. All the lever connectors are in there. One thing on this guy, earlier I mentioned that you'd have to like hold on with like a 10 millimeter and just pull this thing off. Actually, there's a nut under the sticker, and all you have to do is hold on here, break the nut loose, and this thing comes right off. So that's pretty much it. All complete. Alright, we got the tractor started up, and to show you guys how it works. So, and I got my fluke attached here. So how it works is I have it set up to where I pull the lever back, it'll move it backwards, and then if I pull the lever forward, it'll move it in. Like I said. Back, there we go. Pretty neat. Gonna be super handy. Final thoughts on the install for this rear remote kit for this little Kioti CS2220. Overall, pretty easy install. One thing that I don't know if you actually have to do is take the fender off. I think you're able to gain access to everything you need to if you just take this plastic unit off the fender. You can get in there. It was pretty handy for me when I had it off, when I had to get to all the fittings on the transmission to kind of take those off to put stuff back on, because I kind of installed it, I think incorrectly due to the instructions not being very clear, but it's okay. But yeah, overall, pretty sweet little piece. The cylinder is going to be pretty sweet to have for my box blade. Also like to give a shout out to the guys and gals over at Team Tractor Ranch. They were very helpful when I came up with issues. Just give them a call and they were able to help me out pretty quickly. All right, but overall, pretty sweet little piece.